If you want to get instant dreadlocks, make sure to get yourself a Greatlocs crochet hook from Greatlocs.com. Hey, what's going on everybody? Welcome back to an episode of Greatlocs. I'm Gunther the Great, and today is a very interesting video because we're going to be taking a look at NBA Youngboy's dreadlocks and the progression that he's had and what's really going on with him right now, because we've seen some leaked photos and it's just going to be really interesting to see what his dreadlocks look like next. But in this video, we're actually going to see some photos that you guys might have not seen, so make sure to give this video a thumbs up and also make sure to comment down below who you guys would like to see next. But other than that, let's get straight into it. So looking at this first photo, we're seeing that he's getting some length, but one thing you need to notice is that we all remember when he actually cut off his first set of dreadlocks that we all know. So essentially this is his second set of locks after being well known. One thing you really notice about these locks as well is that they're more skinny than the ones he had originally. And another thing you need to know is that these are very freeform like. Now, is he doing complete freeform dreadlocks? I would honestly say most likely, but with the photos that we're going to be seeing at the end of this video, leads me to believe that he's doing something else. And I would definitely say that he's leaning more towards a semi-freeform style. Now let me go ahead and school you guys a little bit on semi-freeform. There's multiple ways on doing semi-freeform dreadlocks. The first way is a very popular way, and you see people like Sway Lee, NBA Youngboy. We've seen Jaden Smith do it on his first set of locks, and so many other people have done this before, even Lil Wayne. And Lil Wayne has done it two different ways, and I'll explain here in a little bit. But the first way of doing semi-freeform is actually starting out the dreadlocks with complete freeform. All you're doing is washing the hair and allowing it to lock up on its own. And then later on down the line, you start doing a maintenance method. And this is typically after the dreadlocks initially lock up, doing completely freeform. So if you go completely freeform to doing a method, then it's called semi-freeform. So say for instance, you start out completely freeforming and then you go into twisting with gel, that's semi-freeform. Or if you start out completely freeform and then you go into crochet hooking, that's semi-freeform. Now there is another way of doing semi-freeform, and it's like how I mentioned with Lil Wayne, is having maintained dreadlocks and then eventually allowing them to go into freeform. So that means you started out with a maintenance method. Say you started out with twisting with gel or instant locking using the crochet hook, and then you eventually allowed it to lock up on its own. Say you didn't want to do any more maintenance, then that's how you could do it. Now we can say that there is a third way. So the third way of doing semi-freeform, when it comes to maintenance, you hardly ever do it. And I'm talking about maybe once every 2, maybe even once every 4 months. So that means you're either twisting with gel or doing crochet hooking or interlocking, and then eventually you just allow it to lock up on its own, and then you come back and do some more maintenance after an elongated amount of time. So now that you guys know a lot about semi-freeform, we see NBA Youngboy's dreadlocks right here, and we see some really skinny ones, and we see some that are still skinny, but they're not as skinny as some of his skinniest. And one thing you also notice is that the roots are very thick, and that's just because they're not maintained. So if we were to point out exactly how he started his semi-freeform dreadlocks, it does appear that he started out with some sort of method and then it just allowed it to lock up on its own afterward, and then he's most likely just doing separation now. Obviously not separating all the way down to the root, but separating enough to where there's not a bunch of congos. And the reason I say that is because all of his new growth is all combined at the root, almost essentially like an afro under the dreadlocks. And all the dreadlock tips are very well separated and look very well maintained, although the roots are not. But I will say overall that his dreadlocks now are way more developed than they were before he cut off his first set of dreadlocks. One thing I really want to point out is that the dreadlocks on the top of his head around his crown area appear a lot longer than the ones that are closer to his hairline. And the reason being is because not only does that hair lock up a whole lot better, but it tends to always appear longer just because it's not getting bunched up. And that's where the hair is really thick. Now the hair around the hairline is really thin and tends to bunch up a lot more versus the hair on the back and the sides of the head. That's why it appears that the hair on the back of his head is a lot longer than the hair that's on the front of his head. And that's really to be expected. So if you're starting dreadlocks and you're going through the whole maintenance process and the locking process, don't be alarmed if the hair on the front of the head isn't even locking up that good, or it appears a lot shorter than the rest of the head. And it's just like I said, it's just because that hair is a lot more thin and it takes a lot more hair and time for that section to actually lock up. But this photo right here gives us a better idea of how the different sizes of his dreadlocks actually look. You can see those extremely skinny ones around the rim of his head, and all the thicker ones are closer to the middle of his head. And that's just because, like I said, it takes less hair for the dreadlocks on the sides of the head, and it takes more hair to create dreadlocks on the top of the head. And that's why we're seeing those different sizes. And I will tell everyone this, if the dreadlocks on the back of your head seem a lot more skinny than the ones on the top of your head, give it some time. You want the hair to get pretty close to completely locking up before making any thickness changes. And what I mean by that is, say that some of the dreadlocks on the back of the head are skinnier than the ones on the top of the head. Don't start combining the ones on the back, because then they'll eventually just become thicker than the dreadlocks on the top of the head. I've made this mistake with my first set of dreadlocks, and it was just because a lot of the dreadlocks on the back of my head were really skinny. And what I didn't know is that they were skinny because they were maturing way quicker than the dreadlocks on the top of the head. So when it came down to it, the dreadlocks on the back of my head were way bigger than the ones on the top, just because I was impatient and I wanted them to become thicker to match the top of the head. But like I said, I would just recommend for you guys to actually just wait it out. And obviously if there is still significant differences closer to it becoming completely locked up, then you can start combining dreadlocks in order to match the thickness if that's something that you wanted to do. But I would also say that if the dreadlocks are different sizes, I think it makes them very unique and different than other people's. Now these next photos are actually really blurry and hard to see, but you can kind of make out what's going on with his dreadlocks. At first, I thought he actually cut his dreadlocks, but at a closer glance, you can see that he has them braided or in some sort of roll, and you can actually see that he has a lot more length to his dreadlocks. Now, what's really interesting is that we see somewhat of separation and parts down the middle of his head, and it almost looks as if he has either 4 or even 6 really big braids on the top of his head. Now, we all know that he does have a high top fade, so it could just be 4 thick braids on the top of his head. But this all ties me back to the semi-free form of his dreadlocks. We're able to see now that he's able to maintain it into braids. Now of course these braids don't look perfect, but if you're able to braid your hair, that means that you have pretty good separation. And to be honest, if you didn't have separation all the way down to the roots, this would become an issue when actually braiding the hair, because that braid would actually completely lock up if he didn't have complete separation. So it's going to be really cool to see some newer pictures of him, either with his dreadlocks outside of these braids, or even if they're still inside the braids. It would even be interesting if he keeps them in and turns these into wicks, which I honestly don't think he will. But to be honest, if he did these improperly, that is exactly what's going to happen. But what do you guys think? Are you excited to see what his dreadlocks look like next? Make sure to comment down below what you think about his dreadlocks, and also, like I said earlier, make sure to comment down below who you guys would like to see next. But other than that, I'll see you guys next time. Peace. Visit Greatlocs.com to save time and money on your dreadlocks. The Greatlocs crochet hook is perfect for making instant dreadlocks and maintaining frizz. The Greatlocs interlock tool is made perfect to tame your new growth. And you can get both these tools now either separately or get them together in the locking bundle. Want to learn how to instantly lock up your own hair or become a loctician and make money while locking up others' hair? Join the Greatlocs Masterclass now on sale for only half the price. Or you can take the Dreadlock School class now for only $20. Click the link in the description to shop now.